Good afternoon on this lovely warm Monday afternoon. So still Monday, so it's still my Monday messages. And today I want to talk about something that comes up quite frequently when I'm first starting to work in a coaching capacity with a lot of the holistic practitioners that I work with, that I support, to expand and grow their themselves and their practices. And that is the thing that comes up regularly and was a conundrum for me many years ago, was the seemingly opposed values of wanting to be of service to people, wanting to share information and practices that we know work, we know help and support in various health situations or ill health situations, and ultimately enable our clients to feel more empowered, more conscious of what nourishes them and what depletes them, and able to make really good, supportive, sustainable choices that that mean that they don't have to keep coming to us as health practitioners quite so often as they might in the beginning of their journey. So that also has to slot in with our own need to sustain ourselves, to be able to put food on the table, to be able to pay our bills, to be able to self-care actually, and do all the things that enable us to lead our own lives of thriving rather than just surviving. Because if we don't do that, then we won't be able to continue offering what we offer. And that often feels in great variance. It feels like a polarity for many of us when we first start out. And not even then, actually, it can feel like, an area of stickiness, even if we've been in practice for a while. And we may actually be exhausting ourselves by wearing several hats, doing two or three jobs that take from us. And then we reach a stage in our lives where we know that it's just not sustainable to continue. And there are some practitioners who come for support and coaching and guidance at that stage as well. And it's never too late to actually make changes in the way that we run our businesses, our practices, and enable ourselves to have a more sustainable working model, if you like. Now, I think that, I don't think, I know that often there are some very disempowering beliefs around our perception of business and the business model, and in particular when we are comparing it to the pharmaceutical model. And quite interestingly, I came across a study that Goldman Sachs commissioned in 2018, actually, where they asked a particular section of the pharmaceutical industry, the medical industry, is curing patients a sustainable business model? And there was a quote from that study: while this proposition carries tremendous value for patients and for society as a whole, it could represent a challenge for medicine developers looking for a sustainable cash flow. So the results of that question were no, it's not a sustainable model. And we often, I think, will take that as, okay, well, then I can't adhere to that model. I can't actually be chasing making money or receiving financial rewards for something that is higher than that, bigger than that, more spiritual. And that the two just aren't compatible, and I just have to, suck it up and continue to either be poor or to run at a deficit, or, as I say, do some other job that also takes from me that actually supports our practice, and it's not sustainable, or seldom is it sustainable. So I want to disengage that belief that a successful business model has to be in line with that model that the pharmaceutical industry is adhering to. And, that constant chasing and creating things that mean that there are customers for life. Of course, there are customers for life because they're not being cured. And cure is something that has almost disappeared from the medical language. It's just not used anymore. It's a bit like, built-in obsolescence in white goods, which is definitely a thing. How can you continue to make money from people who don't need you anymore? And that is a very limited perspective, I believe, because it isn't one that supports most holistic practitioners and the way that they are approaching their business and their whole perspective on life, basically, and the reason that they do what they do, and the reason I do what I do. And I remember when I first started in my practice, I did actually say that I wanted to have some kind of strapline that said, my aim is to make myself redundant. And my business coach at the time nearly fell off a chair and just said, no, Rebecca, don't do that. You can't do that. That's a terrible strapline. You don't want to be making yourself redundant. Because at the time, I don't think she quite got what I meant, and I wasn't very clear about it either. And to be honest, I needed to, find a way of getting enough of a return on what I did in order for me to continue doing it. So now I'm much clearer, much clearer, and I've sort of come full circle, because I would describe myself as semi-retired at the moment, and I have really condensed my working hours and who I choose to work with now. And my absolute pleasure still is in working with my really long-term clients. And these are clients who I may not see from one year to the next. And then there's a crisis in their lives, something happens, or they are exploring something where they just need the expertise of someone who has gone a bit deeper, perhaps, with, certainly with homeopathy, than they have. And it is my pleasure to work with clients like that who already feel empowered and confident and knowledgeable and are managing their health status very successfully for the majority of the time. And they still recognise when they need some outside help, they need some outside support, or they need just the ability to be able to stop and explore in a safe place. And by and large, those long-term clients of mine they're an absolute pleasure to work with, because we get each other, we know each other, we understand each other, we speak the same language. I know what their capabilities are and where their vulnerabilities are, and they're choosing to still come to me when they feel the need, rather than feeling that they've got to come because nothing else has worked and sure, I might as well give it a go. Different energy. I'm not saying, you know, one is better than the other. It's just different. And we all have to start somewhere. And many of those long-term clients came to me in exactly that state, you know, having tried everything else. And they then decided to give homeopathy or QTT a go. So my aim is still to cure. And that, you know, that I may get wrapped over the knuckles for even suggesting that. But surely that is the gold standard of any health practitioner, is to be able to offer the ability to make changes, to make transformations that actually mean that the person feels and is able to behave in a much more healthy, conscious, empowered way, and that they don't continue to need outside help or outside stimulus necessarily, or certainly not as regularly as they may have done at the beginning of their journey. So I'm not afraid now to just say that's my goal. And if that means that I am largely redundant, I think, well, I know that means that I have done what I set out to do, and that ultimately the world is a better place for it. And that, to me, is the gold standard. I'm really interested in lots of things that are going on at the moment, including, for the first time ever in America, actually, amongst all the bad news, that Kennedy has introduced, for the first time ever, federal guidelines for doctors to be able to wean people off antidepressants rather than actually encouraging them to continue. That's a major turnaround, but that should have been in place forever, in my view. And that's something that, as a holistic practitioner, I would do regularly. My aim is to make people healthier, to actually make their need for any kind of health practitioner minimal, not maximal, if that's a word. So that is my gold standard, and I think it should be the gold standard of any health practitioner. And I still really like the traditional Chinese medicine system, whereby the doctor gets paid while you're well and does not get paid if you're sick. Nothing like that as an incentive to keep you well and healthy. So, okay, I think that's it. I've put a set of journal prompts that I hope anybody who is facing a little bit of a conundrum at the moment might find useful, particularly obviously practitioners. I do work with a lot of practitioners, and I love working with health practitioners because they're so skilled and so knowledgeable at what they do, and they're so passionate, and they make a difference. And if I can support them to really shine, then I'm going to reach more people ultimately than sticking to people who aren't in service to others. Now, that's not to say that I don't work with people who aren't health practitioners. Of course I do. Every single person who feels healthier and more empowered and more confident and more knowledgeable about their own healthcare is making the world a better place, whether you're a health practitioner or not. So if I can do that, then I am more than happy. So yeah, you could follow the journal prompts that I've put in the post with this video. Actually, you can kind of alter them even if you're not a health practitioner. They might be useful to you. And if you do want to know about how to work with me in a coaching capacity or as a homeopath, then just pop into my website. The link's in the post with this video as well, and we can have a chat. Okay, thanks very much for listening and have a beautiful week as ever.